Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good evening again, and welcome everyone to the Mentors for College Inside Scoop. This is our night number 2 of the Inside Scoop about selective university admissions. Hopefully you were able to join us for last night's session where we talked about getting yourself ready for college, academic preparation, and finding a good fit for college, as well as the application process. Tonight, we have 2 other admissions reps with us, Megan Dorton from Purdue University and Libby Brown from University of Rochester. And we will be talking about 2 different topics. The topic of alternative approaches to starting college and paying for college. So those, I'm sure, will be very important to all of you who are logged in. Before we get started with our presentation, I do want to talk a little bit about Mentors for College. Our Mentors for College program or organization is a nonprofit organization, and we have volunteer mentors who work one-to-one with students and parents as they go through the search and application process. Our goal is to help all students find the best fit for them for post-high school education. And so our volunteers have been rigorously trained, and we keep up to date with admission trends and important topics that are coming out and changes. So our volunteers work with families based on whenever it is your need. If you want to meet frequently with a mentor, you can meet frequently. If you just need to meet a couple of times, you can do that. But our goal is, as I said, always to help a student find their best fit for post-high school education. And so while you're in high school, we help you make sure that the courses and the things that you're doing in high school will help you be prepared for your post-high school plans, and that ultimately you end up in a good place that's for you. We help with essays and applications, and we help as best we can with advising and guiding students about financial aid and scholarships. And the best part of all of this is it's a completely free resource. And so if, as you are hearing the presentations tonight, you think that it would be beneficial for your family to be matched with a mentor, then you can go to the mentorsforcollege.org website and sign up to be matched with a mentor, and we will get you started as soon as we can. So without further ado, our presentations for tonight. We have, as I said, we have the 2 presentations. And so as you are hearing the information being presented, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and submit the questions through the Q&A icon, and then we will direct them to the admissions reps at the end of the presentations tonight. All right. So we are going to get started with our segment number 3, Alternative Approaches to Starting College, and Megan Dorton from Purdue University is going to be our presenter. So Megan, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Okay, let's get started. It's good to be with everyone this evening. We were talking earlier about how it's just been an odd year as an admission person to not be engaging with students and families in person. So it's just really great to be with you this evening. I always enjoy my time out in your neck of the woods. So I'm looking forward to being back there hopefully soon. So I'm going to start with the topic that I think or tends to be really common, at least in the work that we are doing in the Office of Admissions at Purdue University. So I guess I should start with that. I am from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. So we have a lot of students who choose kind of a wide variety of paths for college credit. And some of the most common options are things that we see students doing while a high school student, kind of in preparation for the matriculation to college, include early college programs, dual or concurrent enrollment programs, meaning most likely your high school is offering college coursework in your high school for college credit and then a grade typically on your transcript. So dual or concurrent credit or enrollment, and then advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and CLEP credit. So those are all kind of credit by exam, essentially, options. So these are really the main ways that we see students kind of pursuing college credit while in high school. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what I think is really important as you're making choices about what rigorous or challenging curriculum should you pursue. And I'm going to have this conversation with the hopes that last night you may have learned about balance and appropriate selection for how much college credit or rigorous coursework makes sense. So I'm going to hope that you've had that conversation already or begun thinking about that. If not, we can chat later about that. But I think what's really important when you're thinking about, do I take AP or dual enrollment, or do I do this early college program that would give me an associate's degree by the time I finish high school? I think there's a lot of things to consider. And I like students to tell me their why. Why are you making these choices? Are you choosing an early college program because you are really planning to go maybe straight to the workforce after high school, and this associate's degree is going to let you move right into the workforce in a career that you're really excited or interested in? Does this early college program allow you and have a seamless transition to just an additional 2 years at a college or university for you to begin your bachelor or finish your bachelor's degree? So what is it about, the AP course? Why are you choosing AP instead of dual enrollment or the other way around? And so I really want to challenge you to think about your why. Why are you making this choice? So for many students, I want college credit. I want to expedite my time to degree when I get to college. I want to have a more affordable college education. So I want to bring in college credit. So that's less that I have to take when I get to college. Or for some, or maybe many students, I just know this is good college preparation. And so I want to prepare myself in the best way possible. So I think when you're trying to decide maybe when you're thinking about why, some things that I would encourage you to think about. So is this college credit? So if you're choosing a credit option, is this credit portable? So can I take this college credit across state lines? I'll use Indiana. Purdue's in Indiana. I'll use us as an example. We have a really robust community college system. It's called Ivy Tech. In the state of Indiana, if you're an institution of higher education, you know what Ivy Tech is, and you really recognize and respect that credit. And most likely, it's already been determined how that credit comes into your institution. So in the state of Indiana, is Ivy Tech credit portable? Yes, the answer is yes. But if a student wants to go to, let's say, Oklahoma, it's hard to say how, if any, of that credit will be portable across our state lines. Does that college or institution know about our community college system? Will they recognize that credit? How will they recognize that credit? So I think that it's important that you think about, is this credit portable? Does the credit carry that recognition? So if you're taking it for rigor, does that rigor hold true when you go beyond state lines? Do people know what that dual enrollment credit is and what it might mean? I'll compare that to potentially an advanced placement or an IB curriculum. That's a national, internationally recognized. Those are internationally recognized programs. So you take those across state lines and you say you're taking AP calculus. Anyone knows what AP calculus is, and we all kind of consider it the same when we're looking at that on the college side. So think about, can I carry this credit with me? And does it align with kind of what I'm hoping to get out of taking this credit in high school? Is it going to actually do what I wanted or hope that it does when I get to college? Another really important factor, and I will say, frankly, this is where I think we find students and families are maybe the most disappointed, or an area that maybe they just didn't know. And that is simply taking college credit in high school doesn't mean that you can lay it right on top of your 4-year degree plan in college and immediately count those as courses you don't have to take when you get to college. Does some of that exist, and are there programs where it's that seamless? Yes. But in general, it doesn't really work that way. You can't take, 12 college credits while in high school, lay them on top of the first year degree plan at Purdue, and know already you have 12 credits you don't have to take. Because in addition to it being college credit, it also has to be college credit that's needed for your degree program. So if you want to be an engineer at Purdue and you have a whole bunch of social science credit that you're bringing in from, let's say your local community college, well, you probably only need 3, maybe 6 credits of social science credit in an engineering 4-year plan of study. So you are going to, if you have a bucket full of social science credit of, let's say, 12 or 16 credits of social science, a lot of that is credit that won't be applicable to your degree plan. So thinking about, we think it's great if you can take dual enrollment credit, but understanding how that fits into your degree plan and that it doesn't just kind of neatly stack on top of your 4-year degree plan in many cases. But you can find that information out early in the process. People like me are able to really help you navigate or figure that out. Will this change my enrollment status? So we often have students who have taken a ton of college credit in high school, and then they think they can apply to college as a transfer student, or do they apply as a transfer student? And so I think this is a question generally, anything that you're doing in high school, even if it's college credit or for college credit, that won't count essentially, and you would still be considered a beginner student, not a transfer student. But kind of asking yourself that question, asking about what I'm going to choose to take in high school, does that impact my enrollment status when I get to college? Another thing that is important when thinking about this kind of credit option, and this is less of a factor at Purdue, but I do know some of our institutions in the state do battle this a little, is at the institute in our state, you cannot get financial aid once you've exceeded 150% of your degree progression. So students who bring in a ton of college credit and then maybe need to retake a couple of courses, or maybe they're really taking a heavy course load, it could impact financial aid eligibility. I would say that's an extreme situation, but it certainly does happen. And when it does, it's really impactful. So just knowing that you only have 150% worth of credits to take before you lose your financial aid eligibility. At least that's the case in Indiana. I think that's the case in a lot of places. So that's another thing to just, again, kind of be mindful of. But all of that to say, really think about your why. Why am I making this choice? And then dependent upon your why, figuring out which option might make the best sense for you. Gap year. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart. I started our gap year program at Purdue a number of years ago. I actually coordinate and make admission decisions on all of the gap year requests that come through our university. So I'm pretty well versed on gap year and have had the privilege, quite honestly, of really being able to see some amazing gap year experiences that students have been able to pursue. So what is a gap year, right? So a gap year is generally a year where students take time between their senior year of high school and their first year of college to do something. So, I think this was maybe made popular when the Obama daughters were going to college, that this kind of became a more common thing that we heard people talking about, but it's happened for a long time. So gap years are great options for students. Again, I think you'd want to really know why you're taking a gap year. You want it to be intentional, because essentially an institution is extending to you an opportunity to hold your place at their college or university. And in many cases, the case at Purdue, and it's the case at many of our peer institutions, we're not only holding your admission, but we're also holding things like your merit scholarship or your honors college admission. And so we've committed to you, and we recognize though that you have this other opportunity or this thing that you want or need to do before you enroll at Purdue or at your chosen institution, and we want to support you in that. And so that's what the gap year is. It's essentially kind of we're kind of providing you the resources so that providing you, I guess, the support as far as your space, keeping that for you as you kind of do these things. So some examples of a gap year program. There are some really cool ones. I think it's called Vertigo maybe education. And it's a really cool option because students can do a gap semester and then roll right into their first year at a college or university. So they have partner institutions. So there's like you can choose to do a gap year program that's very structured and like everyone kind of does this very lockstep process. Or you can, if you have some other kind of interests that you have. I had a student just the other day who requested a gap year, and she has planned an entire year worth of really extraordinary travel. And she's based this all around her interest areas. And so that's something that she put together on her own, but she kind of put forth her plan for that travel. I know of a student, actually a few students who have had just some really incredible work opportunities presented to them. These are work opportunities that I would call more like a contract situation. So one was a student in Silicon Valley who got this opportunity to do a 12-month program. And so he went and did this 12-month program after he finished high school before he came to Purdue. Of course, we want to hold your spot for you. We want you to have these opportunities. And so that's kind of what a gap year program is all about. I had a young woman several years ago now who, through I think quite a bit of good fortune, had a relationship with a bank in Italy. And her interest area was international finance. Well, of course, we want you to take that opportunity, right? And so the gap year was just a perfect way for her to do that. I want to say that gap year doesn't always, and this is going to be specific to the institution that you're applying to and what their gap year policy is. Not all institutions have gap year policies. So this is something you're going to want to discuss with the institution you ultimately choose to enroll at. Or it might be a consideration as you're evaluating the institutions that you're considering is, I know I want to do a gap year. Do you have a gap year policy? So it may be a factor for you. But I don't want you to think that all gap years have to include some lavish travel experience or some kind of really what seems like an out of this world experience. I have students who have chosen to do a gap year because quite frankly, they just weren't ready to go to college. They didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. They just needed a minute to breathe and a minute. They were good, strong students, but they just weren't really in the right frame of mind. They weren't in the right place to begin college, and they had the ability to know that about themselves and take the gap year. So a gap year doesn't have to be, this great kind of lavish experience. In some cases it is, but some students can use the gap year for, self-reflection. Some students can use it as an opportunity if they need time to get their mental or physical health in order. Maybe you have a really big kind of life-altering surgery that you need to do, and this is maybe a good time for you to do that. A gap year is another example of something that's an example of something that a gap year would allow you to do. So gap years they're a great option for you. I think that if you have something in mind that you would really like to do before you kind of get into that 4 years of your college experience, thinking about a gap year is a really great option. And like I said, there's tons of really good programs that are out there if you're looking for something that's established for you. And then if you are someone who is really looking for, if you already know what you want to do, that's going to be an option as well. Good night, Mom. Sorry, I have a 5-year-old right by my side. It'll be just 1 second. Bedtime. So thank you for bearing with me. So some other things that I think kind of fall in the same vein would be an academic bridge program. So at Purdue, we actually have a whole variety of academic bridge programs. A common thing with Academic Bridge, typically it's going to be a bridge, something that the college or university is going to offer you as a way to ensure kind of a smooth transition to the university. So typically these are going to be maybe more like a boot camp style. So we want you, we've admitted you to a computer science major, but we see you don't have any programming experience. So come and do this bridge program with us so that we can be sure when your classes begin in August, you're ready to hit the ground running. It could be, we're maybe not quite sure about whether or not you're ready to begin at our institution, but we think with, an intensive 5-week cohort model that you're going to have all the support you need. You're going to have had an opportunity to get your feet wet, to really figure out college, to take a college level course or two that's going to apply to your major. And then when classes begin in August and you have a full course load and, all the fun stuff that comes along with college, you're prepared for that. And so academic bridge programs are, I think, a really great option. And in some cases, there may be your only option. So I think that it's really important that you think about, if you've been offered a bridge program, it's probably because the institution has said, this is the path for you to come to our institution. So really evaluating what that might mean. I'll give you, just so I know my time's up. So I'll give you just a minute, brief note about bridge programs. So Purdue started with an academic bridge program. We did it for 2 years, and we started getting this rush of phone calls from families that said, hey, I know such and such who did this program called Summer Start. My kid really wants to do Summer Start. What do they need to do to be in the program? And I'll tell you what, the students wanted to be in the bridge program. So we created a bridge program for students to opt into because there were students who wanted the opportunity to have that connection. So essentially the opposite of what I just talked about with students wanting to do gap year, we see the opposite with some students. They're ready to hit the ground running. They're ready to get to college. We're actually seeing this in even more now. Students have been remote for so long. Purdue's been in person. Students they just want to get moving on college. And so bridge programs are a great option as well. And like gap year, both of these will have a cost associated with them. So I always just, I think all the things that are important anytime you're evaluating something that has a cost, know what you're kind of willing and able to pay, and think about or talk about all the ways to make that happen. So, okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Okay, can you stop? Oh, thank you very much. Okay. All right. And as we make the transition, thank you, Megan, for that presentation. As we make the transition to our next presentation, I just want to remind everyone that we are recording this webinar, and we will be posting on our website the recording of tonight's session as well as last night's session. And so if you have any questions or you want to look back and see the slides, you can for sure go back and see what you missed or refresh your memory. So if you have any questions as we're going through this, I know we did get some questions already submitted, and so we're keeping track of those, and we will answer those after we finish this second presentation. And so next up is Libby Brown from Rochester, University of Rochester, and she will be talking about paying for college.
Yeah, we talk a lot about cost and how to finance your education, especially when we talk about this in the bigger picture of conversations around how to, again, approach the framing of your college experience. Are you going to look at in-state, out-of-state, private, public, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges? And then obviously, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the undergraduate side. But again, it's a very important conversation to think about what is that next level? What is that next step when you're moving forward into that graduate program? If you're thinking about becoming a doctor, yeah, most doctors require a fair bit of education beyond just their 4 years moving from the undergrad. So I'm excited to share time tonight. My name is Libby Brown. I'm actually one of the regional folks that works with typically more of the West Coast, but I'm excited to share time with you all, and I'm certainly excited to share Oh boy, a whole lot of stuff related to costs, and I apologize in advance if this is a fairly overwhelming amount of knowledge that I'm imparting upon you. I'll try and make it easy, especially when it comes to financing the process as a whole. I'm going to talk about cost. What does that really look like? What are some of the definitions that are helpful in this navigation experience? We're going to talk about financial aid, what the difference of one side versus the other is. Typically, we talk about these in two kind of pronged approaches. And then again, applying what does that process look like, thinking about timelines, checklists. I know many of you may be juniors and starting to think about this process for the following year as a senior, but we always appreciate students who are eager to start the process a little bit early in this conversation, and we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the earlier stages as well. And for family members versus students, I think that this is a great conversation to have as a family, as a part of the bigger conversation around college as a whole. There is obviously some definitions that I want to be able to identify first. The important piece is that, again, when you're looking at the sticker price, I will say that most colleges look really expensive on paper. And especially for families that are thinking, that is my family income. My goodness, how are you asking me to pay for that for 1 year alone? I can't do that. I know that my family can't afford that. There's a lot of mechanisms in place within the education system within the United States, and then also abroad, that will be able to help foster additional opportunities, and especially for the cost of attendance versus the sort of sticker price, the broader cost of what you're seeing on paper. A lot of families pay significantly less than what that initial cost looks like. And so when we're talking about cost of attendance, it's not necessarily, again, the sort of amount that you will be ultimately paying for as a family, but it is essentially what everything all told will look like. Without that additional financial aid assistance, it can look like a really big amount of money. Some schools will look very affordable on paper after all of these pieces. Some schools will look exorbitant by comparison to, let's say, in-state options. And then when you finally get to the end of this process and you see all of the additional support that you're getting from these institutions, it may ultimately be a much more affordable option for you to consider moving forward with an institution that is, again, a private institution, or an in-state option may end up being roughly equivalent. So keeping all of this in mind, we do think about the cost of attendance as a big picture. We think about the, again, tuition, i.e., what a cost of a class takes on, fees, things like student fees, or additional context for room and board, especially for students that are thinking about staying local versus going out of state and staying abroad. All of these costs may look very different. I work with a lot of students from the California region. Staying in state and thinking about staying on campus or off campus in the Bay Area does look very different than Midwest or where Rochester is located in upstate New York. Again, we talk about the additional context of books and supplies, transportation, what does it cost for an airline ticket? And again, additional pieces that all of these are going to be taking into account. We do think about these in the context of financial aid. So like I said, when we're talking about financial aid, we look at the sort of need blind versus need aware, meaning what is your family's contribution going to look like? Most schools will have, again, a sort of combination process. Initial phases might be completely not taking into consideration what your family contribution might be. Some schools may have that from the very beginning. But again, in both cases, the student will be packaged according to their financial need. Both families, again, are processes when we're looking at the decision-making process. We do take into account other factors. That holistic review is very common and very typical for most institutions. Some institutions do have a much more sort of indexed process that looks at, again, just GPA, test scores, and maybe ranking, something like that. And then they'll be able to admit the student based on that, and no other factors are included. Some schools like Rochester are extraordinarily nuanced in the way that they approach the student's application. All sorts of different factors are included, including essays, letters of recommendation, yes, your transcripts, additional context of like an interview, stuff like that. But when it comes to need-based aid, what does it mean? Essentially, it means that when we are considering this process, financial aid is considered on the, again, a bigger picture of what your family can afford and what your family is able to afford as part of a couple of different metrics. We do look at need-based aid as part of this process in a couple of different categories as well. Grants and scholarships typically are associated with free money, for lack of a better term. Most of the time it's earned, but you know, in terms of the way that it's approached, it means that you don't have to pay it back. Loans, you do. Especially for students who are looking at in-state options versus out-of-state options. For example, New York State regulations allow for additional grants to be associated with the student that are attending in-state, whatever institution they're attending, whether it be an in-state public institution or an in-state private institution. There are certain aid funding that may be available to them. I know Missouri has a number of these sorts of options as well, especially for institutional and federal grants. They may look different depending on, again, the opportunities or the metrics that the student or the family is going to be including. Especially for institutional grants, that may vary from institution to institution. Most of this information is found on the financial aid websites of any school that you're going to be visiting. So when you're looking at these kind of bigger picture pieces and thinking, oh my goodness, Libby's talking about all this stuff and I just don't understand it. A lot of these will also be given definitions and context on the websites of the schools that you're going to be visiting as well. And obviously the Mentors for College will be able to help with all of these sorts of nuts and bolts pieces too. But loans essentially are funds that are borrowed. They must be paid back. I won't get into the details, nitty-gritty details of what a subsidized versus unsubsidized means in the context of students, but essentially what it means is sometimes there's interest that's being accrued, sometimes there's not. And usually, again, the interest rates will depend, especially for families that are going to be taking on outside loans versus federal loans. Or state loans, there's going to be additional context that you're going to be wanting to work with the financial aid office as well. There's sometimes a little bit of nuance in the ways that you're able to, again, work with the need-based process and the merit-based process. Sometimes these additional merit scholarships that may be offered from an institution may impact the need-based offerings that are, you know, in your financial aid package. And so especially for the context, again, I'm going to reiterate this at the end of my presentation, but it's really important to just be working with your colleges, working with the financial aid offices in a very one-to-one kind of conversation. It all is nuanced. It all is going to be, again, a part of the conversation that you're going to have at the end of this process. But getting in the conversations early with these financial aid offices, really honing in on what your family needs and what your family is going to be asking for, that's going to be an important part of the process as well. We do offer, again, work study. It means that the money is being earned directly through the student's job on campus. Work study can look a lot of different ways. It certainly can include things like office assistant work, research assistant work. Sometimes it creates a much more, again, a robust experience for the student on campus. But again, it's a part of the financial aid processes that students will be incorporating. So again, grants, free money, loans, you have to pay them back, and work study is earned money as part of that process. Merit scholarships and merit grants can also be a part of that. They can look very different depending on your context. So we do have merit scholarships that are based on talents and work that the student is doing throughout their time. Sometimes things like sports, Division I and Division II communities may offer sports scholarships. A school like Rochester that is Division III may not be able to do that. It basically is a category that, again, limits some of those opportunities. But scholarships can be, again, based on all sorts of different opportunities. They are typically based on a combination of different factors. They could be inclusive of academic experiences. They could be inclusive of more of an institutional priority. So a school like Rochester really values the idea of community and connection and service. So we offer service-based scholarships. We offer institutional-based scholarships. If you are an international baccalaureate student, like Megan was mentioning mentioning earlier. You've been a participant in FIRST robotics, things like that. We certainly see students who are participating in a wide variety of options, and we want to be able to, again, identify that and really, again, not reward it necessarily in that term, but be able to identify that and continue that enthusiasm and recognition throughout their 4 years with us. I will say that in all of the institutions that I worked at, merit-based scholarships tend to follow you. The financial need-based side tends to be something that you have to reapply for every year. Because it's based on the family circumstances, let's say you win the lottery, you're going to be in a very different financial situation for that year. And certainly moving forward, the merit-based experiences tend to, again, tend to be the same amount from year to year. But you're going to want to talk to the schools about whether or not that is a lump sum that you receive, if this is a scholarship that is over the course of 4 years, or if it is again, a repeated scholarship that amount follows you every year over the course of 4 years. Important questions to ask for your schools. I did mention community or outside scholarships. There are certainly a lot of institution-specific partnerships and relationships that are available, as well as additional scholarships that you may want to be thinking about in that junior year when you're applying for schools. A lot of these earlier scholarships, like the Gates scholarships, the Coca-Cola scholarships, they are additional funds that can be a really large, really wonderful support as part of the students moving forward. But they tend to have timelines that are very similar to the academic application process as well. So keeping in mind that if you are a part of certain organizations like the Posse Scholarship, like Westbridge, there's going to be, again, some additional support processes that are going to be factored into that. Additional interviews, additional context, essays, those sorts of things. So it is really helpful to think about these sorts of pieces now as opposed to later, and especially for students that are going to be thinking about, how do I go about doing this? How do I keep all of my nuts and bolts in the same sort of context? I'm lost already. There's a lot of resources online. So the first is that we do have a financial need-based side that is through a couple of sort of systems. The federal application, free application for federal student aid is a free application. Once again, if you find yourself getting into the end of the process and all of a sudden they're asking you to pay, you have not gone to the FAFSA. It is a federal created experience. It is a .gov, I believe, .org organization as part of that. And so one of the things that this creates is a unilateral system that all schools tap into in order to understand your federal financial need-based aid. The FAFSA allows for a lot of nuance, but some schools will ask for additional forms on top of that for additional context, additional continuing sort of details or additional sort of nuance as part of that. And that's what we call the CSS profile or additional institutional forms as well. This is, again, the free application typically is, again, a very straightforward process. The CSS profile does typically have a fee associated with it. So if your institution that you're applying to asks for it, but you are a SAT waiver or a free and reduced lunch student, that is an opportunity for students to, again, request that additional waiver for the CSS profile as well. And again, it allows us to just get more nuance. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details of it, but again, it is very straightforward in the bigger picture, but it is something that you're going to be needing to apply for each year. There are some really complex additional contexts that students will be, again, wanting to reach out to their schools. If there's additional context and you're asking, how am I getting this number? It is a methodology that is through the federal forms. It is a Department of Education system. It's not the individual school. However, all students can additionally request reconsideration, appeals, work through the income assets. Sometimes students put something one place and it should have been in another. And sometimes that means that you'll have additional follow-up that's going to be needed. But it allows for us to see what we call an expected family contribution. For many students that are going to be seeking aid, they may have, again, a net price that they're looking at and saying, there's no way I can afford that. Most of the time that student will receive an exceptionally large amount of federal aid or federal support as part of that process. that expected family contribution will include essentially saying this family can contribute basically nothing. And that basically allows for schools like Rochester, who is a community that meets 100% of demonstrated need, to say, okay, we're going to meet up to whatever you can afford. And again, that EFC, or expected family contribution, some schools may not be able to meet that full need. Some schools may be able to. Some schools, it won't necessarily matter, but the net price calculator is a great tool to be able to start to understand what that really is going to look like. Again, it does usually require some income asset information, basic information that you're going to be sharing on the FAFSA as well. It is on every single financial aid website of every single school that you're applying to, in-state, out-of-state, private, public. All of us should have a net price calculator on there. And it sometimes can include additional merit scholarship information. But again, keeping in mind that additional outside scholarships, community scholarships, national scholarships, things like the ROTC, et cetera, those things can be additional factors that might cut that cost in a really dramatic way that we may not be able to share on the net price calculator. Again, additional circumstances. I understand that this is a huge amount of information that I'm sharing with you. There are a lot of upheaval and experiences that students have faced this year that are COVID related. The pandemic has been certainly upheaving to so many. So one of the things that I typically recommend as part of this big picture is just to plan for a really close relationship with your financial aid counselors, really close relationship with this wonderful community that we're presenting with tonight. Mentors for College are going to be a wonderful resource in some of these nuanced pieces, but keeping in mind that there are also additional opportunities for funding, additional scholarships, all of these pieces. If you're thinking 9th and 10th grade, start thinking about what that conversation is going to look like. What is the family situation? What are the kinds of circumstances that you're going to need to start thinking about, and start exploring those additional scholarships. Sooner rather than later is always, always helpful. And when you're walking through this process of the admissions in the senior year, let's say, August, September, October, think that it's going to be a concurrent process with the financial aid process as well. You always want to put yourself in the best timelines possible. Some of these financial need-based aid, merit aid, scholarships, all of these pieces may be deadlines that are roughly around the same timelines as your application process. You don't want to miss out on opportunities. So again, keeping organized, making sure that all of your pieces are in the puzzle. Moving into this final stage of your process, we want to be able to make sure that, again, all schools are going to be affordable for you, that you're going to have opportunities anywhere that you apply. So these are some resources. I'll leave it up for now. Jenny, I don't know if you wanted me to put these into the chat as well, but I understand that there's going to be a lot of resources available. I've run out of time. We have plenty of time, I hope, for Q&A as well, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here. And my best wishes to all of you. Obviously, it's been an extraordinary year, and we're hoping that you stay safe, stay well, and we're looking forward to hopefully answering more questions that might have come through the chat. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen again. Okay, thank you very much, Libby. Really appreciate it. And we have had several questions come through the chat, and so I will address those as we are getting those final questions in. For those of you who are viewing, just as a reminder, if you need help, these Megan and Libby covered a lot of topics on this list tonight, and the rest of them pretty much were covered last night. And so if you have questions about any of these things and you think working with a mentor would be helpful, please don't hesitate to go to our website and sign up to be matched with a mentor. And so at this time, I am going to go to the chat and address some questions to you, both of you, Megan and Libby. So let's start with a question: can a gap year be taken during college instead of between high school and college? So Megan, you want to start with that?
Sure. So I think I'll start by saying the typical answer is no, but there are probably ways that you can do something like a gap year once you've enrolled at your chosen institution. At Purdue, for example, students are allowed to be away from Purdue for 3 consecutive semesters without losing their enrollment eligibility. So you can step away for any reason. It doesn't have to be kind of an approved gap year like it does on the front end. So, I think that the short answer is no, but the longer answer is there are most likely lots of ways that you can step away from your education for, a variety of things that might be really important or necessary for you to do.
And I'll just quickly add that it usually is referred to as a leave of absence. If you're wondering if that's a pathway that you might want to take, especially for pre-approved things like a co-op experience, an internship that you're doing during the semester, you're still considered an enrolled student at that point. So there's nuance to all of this study abroad and all of these different pieces too, but Megan did a great job, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. Is financial aid different if I apply early decision?
That's a great question. I think it depends somewhat on the institutions. Obviously, early decision, for those that are a little bit less familiar, it's a binding decision, which means that when you apply through that process, it is required of you to attend. In essence, you're sort of signing a contract that says, if you accept me, I'm coming. And that can be a very intimidating thing for families, and something that I typically am, really recommending only for students that are, this is my dream school, this is my priority, I know that this is going to be the right fit for me no matter what. That kind of attitude, I think, is the only time that students should be applying early decision. But for lack of a better term, yes, a lot of students will have essentially similar financial aid packages. It's again, dependent upon the institutions, but one thing that may be somewhat concerning is that a financial aid package that a student receives may not be what the family wanted. And there is a very distinct difference, I think, from what the family on paper, according to the federal government, can afford versus what the family wants to pay. And it is a concept that I think is a good conversation to have as a family, as a community, to make sure that there's a clear picture of what the family really has as sort of wiggle room and what the family may not be able to make work. And I think for a lot of families that look at an early decision package in that financial aid process, it really is a one-to-one process, and it doesn't give you the same flexibility as a regular decision process that allows you to sort of compare and contrast different financial aid packages. And so especially for students that may be concerned about costs, I always recommend for families to maybe consider an early action process or a regular decision process instead, because it does allow for that more flexible comparing and contrasting. The only time that we typically allow releasing from that early decision process that is binding is in the financial category, that a family says, we just can't make this work. Please release us from this decision. And so it is a conversation that I typically recommend having, especially with the financial aid offices and different processes. That again is a particular question that can be nuanced and a difficult one to sometimes answer just off the bat. So it depends, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you. All right, another question that came through is, what about going to community college for 2 years and then transferring to a 4-year college? Is that a good idea? So Megan, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I can start, and I'll probably dip my toes a little bit into Libby's financial aid world with this question. So absolutely, you can start at a community college. We, we see students coming to Purdue, and I've worked at other institutions. We see students coming after 1 semester or as many as 4 from the community college. So, if you want to finish that associate's degree at the community college, that's totally an option for you. I think this goes back to kind of a theme that you're probably going to continue hearing throughout this process, is you're probably just going to want to ask a lot of questions up front. So I'll use a few Purdue examples to just help paint paint a little bit of a picture for you about some considerations for transfer. So let's say you started at the community college and you want to be a psychology major. You can do an entire associate's degree program at our community college, or any community college really for that matter. As long as you do a few things, meet a few requirements, you can always transfer into psychology at Purdue. It's always open to transfer students. And the plan of study, so the 4-year curriculum for that major is flexible enough, and it's not so lockstep that you would really delay your time to degree. You might delay it maybe a semester or so, depending on how those courses, if you were studying something totally unrelated to psychology at the community college, you might not have quite as much overlapping. But generally, you could do that probably pretty seamlessly. If you, and we can tell you, we can say this many credits apply to the plan of study for the major you want, or this many don't apply. I could tell you today how many credits on an associate's degree program in psychology from your local community college would apply to the plan of study for psychology at Purdue. All that information is available, and we will tell it to you. So that's one example. If you start out at the community college and you say, I'm going to the community college for 2 years, and then I'm going to transfer into engineering or Purdue at Purdue, or engineering or computer science at Purdue, I'm going to say, you're not going to, because we're not open to transfer students. Or for some majors, maybe we do take transfers, but you must have very specific coursework, and that coursework has to be taken, and it has to be a specific grade, and it has to come exactly as the plan of study requires it, because that major is incredibly lockstep. It's incredibly prescribed. And so if you spent 2 years at a community college and then you wanted to come to Purdue in, engineering or sciences, something that does take transfer students, the likelihood that you would only have a couple years left is you'd essentially probably all but start over. So it's a really nuanced process. And I think when you're talking STEM majors, it's, I think, probably even more nuanced, because programs in STEM are generally very lockstep. They generally don't have a lot of, especially at a STEM school. We're not a liberal arts institution, so our curriculum doesn't allow for a lot of that kind of gen ed type coursework that many students kind of think they can get out of the way in 2 years, but it doesn't work like that at all institutions, or for all majors for that matter. So
Right.
And then I also just wanted to add, at least at Purdue, and this was actually the case at some other places I worked, we don't offer great scholarships, or any for that matter, for transfer students. So I do always caution students. I think community college is a really great option, but I also think that if you are a student who's incredibly bright and has the opportunity to get some really financial merit-based scholarships as a new beginner to some institutions, I think you're going to have to weigh the cost benefit of potentially not having the opportunity to get those merit scholarships as a transfer. It might not matter if you're saving enough money and the credit comes in well enough, it might come out in the wash. But I do think that that's an important consideration for students who may be eligible for merit-based scholarships specifically.
Okay,
And
great.
I was
Thanks.
going to mention that, yeah, especially with as the context of your coursework. I also like to mention that some schools, such as Rochester, that have an open curriculum, you don't want to go to a general education associate's program, because it will be coursework that ultimately doesn't necessarily move you forward in the career or context of the academic pathways here. But at a school that is maybe, again, a private institution, there may be more opportunities for additional scholarship, for transfers. We have basically the same policies and practices for our freshmen as our transfers. So it may not be as helpful in one side or category, but it may be more helpful in the other. And so it's again, a conversation that you're going to want to have with the individual school.
Right.
And
Okay,
we will
good.
have those conversations with you. We will spend the time with you, because we know how important those questions are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Those are some very important things for people to know and be able to ask questions about later. Okay, next question. Is a work-study job guaranteed by the school, or if I get approved, will it be that there won't be a work-study available in the end? So Libby, can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think student employment is always a little bit dependent upon a number of factors at the institution again, but a school will prioritize work study because it is money from the government, essentially, that they are, incorporating that into the federal packaging process. And so especially for schools, they look like free money to them too, because they're not employing you, that's coming from a different source. And so most of the time, schools will try and prioritize the work study students, not just because it's part of their financial aid package, but also because it's less of an investment on their end. It doesn't necessarily mean that, again, you'll get the thing that you want. I think a lot of students think work study and they want to be in, let's say, an office assistant in their major office, right? Sometimes work study will look like you are washing dishes in the kitchens at school too. Like there's a lot of different pieces to that. But one of the things that I didn't mention in the financial aid conversation also is that there's ways to reduce the cost too. I mentioned room and board as part of the tuition fees, all of these sorts of contexts for the total cost of attendance. I was in residence life for 3 years of my college experience, and I paid no room and board the whole time, especially for students that are thinking, I'm a really outgoing person and I know I'm going to want to have this type of job. Something like a work study position may be a part of your financial aid package, but there's ways to accommodate additional research or study abroad scholarships or things like residence life, work and positions to be able to make the options more affordable as well. So there's all sorts of different modes and pieces of this process. And again, we're more than happy to answer any of those questions, but typically a work study position is not necessarily officially guaranteed, but will be prioritized.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, another question that came through: when does the college tell you your aid package?
Again, it sometimes depends. I think for most schools, they try and unite the application decision with the financial aid package. I have seen it be, really early decision that is being released within weeks of the student applying, and then the financial aid package follows weeks after that. And I've also seen it, you literally have it in the package with you at the same time. I think, again, it depends on the institution, it depends on the school. If you ask, they'll probably give you a clearer picture. But all schools typically have that decision deadline of May 1st. Essentially, it's what we call the universal decision deadline, where we expect most students to make their decision on who they're enrolling with as part of the April-ish timeframe at the very latest. So some schools, like let's say the Ivies, will possibly be releasing a financial aid package and their decisions quite late in the process, and other schools may be releasing it very early on as part of an early action process. All of that really, again, allows you to have maybe a smaller window, but still a window of time to make that decision and work with the financial aid packaging and the different offices that you're going to be applying to with that decision. But again, the scholarship and grants and appeals and all these different things, my recommendation is be a squeaky wheel, have a conversation. And even if you don't feel like it's going to be productive, it's still helpful, I think, to be able to exhaust all options either way.
Okay, Megan, did you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing that has really cropped up this year. And so at least at Purdue, and I don't know, Libby, if this is true at Rochester as well, but if a student doesn't file a FAFSA, unless they receive a merit-based scholarship, a student who does not file a FAFSA does not get a financial aid award package. So we were hearing from students who were wondering where their award package was, but they didn't file the FAFSA. So I think it's just really important to know that those two things really go hand in hand. We don't have anything to award if there's nothing for us to evaluate, essentially, the financial aid on. So I wanted to just highlight that, connect that dot.
Right, that's a very good point. Everyone should fill out the FAFSA.
Yeah,
everyone.
and I recommend that for families that don't think that they're going to get anything, as much as families that are very much going to be dependent upon that process. It is universally helpful. If nothing else, one of the things that we also saw this year with COVID, circumstances changed for families, and especially for current students that may have not filed because their family was in a much better position to pay for the institution. Without that financial aid process sort of igniting with the FAFSA and the additional context for it, we weren't able to, again, support them in the same ways. And so we always recommend, even if you are tired to death of filing this thing again and again and again, you have to do it each year, but it is really helpful in case circumstances change. You don't want to be out in the lurch and trying to figure out how to afford college, especially midstream. Yeah.
Okay. All right, ladies, I'm looking at the time and I think we are about at the time where we need to wrap up. I want to say thank you once again to both of you, Megan and Libby, for being our guest presenters tonight. You provided some very, very helpful information and things for all of us to think about, the students and the parents who are participating tonight, as well as the mentors who are participating. We always learn every time we hear from admissions reps. And so if I can just share one other takeaway, I would say to any students and parents who are out there, every admissions rep that I have spoken with always says, we really do want to hear from the students and the families. We want to meet you. We want to know who you are. And so whether you are a freshman, sophomore, or junior, wherever you are in the process, start now reaching out to the admissions reps at the universities that are on your list or that you think you might be interested in, because they really can help you a lot with different aspects of the process. And as I said before, if having a mentor you think would be helpful, please go to the mentorsforcollege.org website. You can see not just there's lots of resources. We have presentations, recordings from all of our previous presentations. We do monthly webinars. And so we want to help as much as we can and make sure that college is accessible to everyone. So thank you very much, everyone, for being with us tonight, and let us know how we can help. Thank you again, Megan and Libby, for your presentations. We really appreciate you partnering with Mentors for College.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yep, it was great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.